Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Alexandra Dorca, and I'm the Executive Director of l'Alliance Française de Seattle. This is our last meeting of the spring quarter, but we will be back in September, so good news. In the meantime, we are preparing a stream concert for Fête de la Musique, the Music Day in June, so stay tuned. I will make an exception today, and I will take a couple of minutes to tell you a story before introducing Colleen. So when we moved to Seattle from Montreal 6 years ago, someone put me in touch with Otilia Baraboy, who is the exec at the American Romanian Cultural Society in Seattle. And she told me, you have to go to Maryhill to see the Romanian collection. So we did it that summer in 2014. And I didn't Google the museum before, so I didn't know what to expect. And when we arrived at the museum, each room came as a huge surprise, because between their Rodin collection, their more than 400 chess set collections, the Orthodox icons, the artifacts from the Romanian royal family, a superb Amerindian collection, French dolls, artifacts from Louis Fuller, who was friend with Rodin, but who was friend with Queen Mary of Romania as well, and not to forget the Stonehenge replica, and the scenery, because the museum sits on the border of the Columbia River, and then you have the desert behind. It's just breathtaking. So when I got in touch with Colleen to invite her to this talk, I said to her that this was probably one of the most beautiful museums I ever seen. And I felt also to tell her that I visited many great museums in Europe, in Western Europe, in Eastern Europe, in North America, Canada, the States, East Coast, West Coast. But in the meantime, I gave it a second thought, and this is the most beautiful museum I ever seen. And I can't wait to see it again. I can't wait to bring the museum to Seattle. I can't wait to bring l'Alliance to the museum. And I will conclude on a very topical note by telling you that this museum is the proof that transcultural dialogue is possible, and that cosmopolitanism is not just a simple word. So thank you very much, Colleen, for being here, and we cannot wait to hear you.
Oh, well, that was such a wonderful introduction. Thank you very much. Maryhill is really one of the most astounding places. I have been working there for oh my gosh, over 30 years now. And every day I go into the museum and I'm astounded by the beauty of it and the wonderful collections and the cultures it represents. So I brought with me some slides and pictures to share with you today. And we're going to talk specifically about all of the sorts of French things you can see at Maryhill Museum, but there's many, many more things. And so I want you to keep that in mind as we kind of go through the PowerPoint. And so here's the Maryhill Museum of Art. Over 80 years ago, it was dedicated, and then over 80 years ago, it opened to the public, but it was dedicated in 1926 by Queen Marie of Romania. And how do I get to the next slide? This is one thing. There we go. It's just a little slow, I guess. In any event, we skipped a slide. Let's see if it won't go back. We're going to stop this and start it over again, you guys.
Okay, take your time.
I am, because for some reason the buttons aren't letting it click forward. Okay, now I see it. Got it. My apologies. So the museum itself was founded by these four individuals. The first, of course, is Samuel Hill. You can see him up here in the upper left corner. The next was Loie Fuller, who was his inspiration, his muse, if you will. And then, of course, Queen Maria Romania, who dedicated the museum in 1926. And then Alma Spreckels, who actually did a lot of the kind of grunt work, I always think of it, to get the museum opened in 1940. Sam was born in 1857. He was born in the South. He moved to Minneapolis. And this is a really quick bio of him, but he moved to Minneapolis and he grew up there. Eventually, he became a lawyer and he began working for the Great Northern Railroad. And it was the Great Northern Railroad and his business enterprises in Minneapolis that brought him to the Pacific Northwest, brought him eventually to the place down on the Columbia River he wished to call his home. And as you can see, this is an early picture of the museum. He hoped to have a Maryhill land company here, where the land where the rain and the sunshine meet. And so it was a pretty important thing for Hill, and it was a big dream of his. He hoped to have a Quaker farming community here along the banks of the Columbia River. Along the way, he did so many things, from the Peace Arch up at Blaine, Washington, to Stonehenge Memorial, to roadworks, to all sorts of things in the Pacific Northwest. But I suppose to get to the meat of this story today, we want to talk about Loie Fuller. Loie Fuller was born in 1863, died in 1928. She was an extraordinary person. She was born just south of Chicago, Fullersburg, actually. Her family comes from there. She, as a very young person, wanted to go to the stage. She ended up in New York. She ended up in London. She came back to New York, but somewhere between London and New York, she became less of an actress and more of a dancer. And these are just three images of Loie that are in the collection that you can see at Maryhill. And here are a couple more photographs that kind of give you an idea of the spectacularness of her dancing, which drew raves and reviews. And she was phenomenal, actually. Her early work especially was absolutely phenomenal, very innovative. When she finally got to Paris, she wanted to open at the Opera, but unfortunately that fell through, so she ended up opening at the Folies Bergère. And here she became known for these dances of light and color and huge yards of diaphanous materials on which the colors could play across the screen. She inspired artists such as Emile Gallet. You can see this vase at the museum today, and this is the butterfly vase. She inspired other artists. This is a piece by Roger Marx, and Pierre Roche actually did the artwork. Roger Marx wrote the essay about Loie Fuller, and this book is at the museum. It's a pretty rare book full of these beautiful lithographs. And of course, the posters for all her dancing. So she began dancing around 1900 in Paris, and these huge posters went up all over to get people excited about the dance. This is the great lithographic art of Paris at the time. These particular ones were by F. Appel and A. Hubrock, and that's the one on the right, and then the one on the left was one of the very first of Loie Fuller. And these are wonderful lithographic posters of the period, just to get people to her performances, This one is in the collection. It's not out currently. It's by Jules Chéret, and it's the La Loie Fuller. It's probably one of the more famous lithographs. It was done in 1897. And she was very, very famous. Honestly, she drew crowds. She drew, there we go. I think I'm going in the right direction. There we go. She drew crowds. People flocked to see her. Artists flocked to see her. She was the toast of town. Some of the artists who portrayed her included Rodin. That's a watercolor of Loewy on the left, Toulouse Lautrec on the right. These are not in the collection, but I just wanted to show you the sort of scope and how fascinating the artist found her work. This is Loewy Fuller. Just a second, I want to go back one. Sometimes the little buttons disappear and I don't know why. In any event, this is Loewy Fuller, and she's on a road, a brick road in Belgium, I believe, and she's with Sam Hill. And at the time, they were creating a film called The Sacred Faith of a Scrap of Paper, which recognized the peace between England, Canada, United States, and France, and everybody else, honestly, and was to commemorate the opening of the Peace Arch up in Blaine, Washington. So we're going to go out of that again, and we're going to open it up and see if we can't get it going again. We'll try it that way. Well, folks, we may just have to go on without the pictures because I can't seem to.
Colleen, try to find arrows on your.
Yes,
computer.
I was looking for those and they've disappeared somehow.
But just on your computer, it might work with the arrows on your
screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've tried that. It may be the internet connection isn't the greatest to
I think you have to zoom out, and then maybe you'll see the arrows again.
Okay, zoom out. How do I do that?
Yeah. Are you on a laptop or on a desktop?
I'm on a laptop, yes.
Okay, so with the fingers, then you are able to zoom.
Zoom it in?
Yeah.
They're like that, maybe. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Maybe that, yeah, there we go. Thank you. I'm so sorry. Here's Toulouse Lautrec, and then this is by Audrey Beardsley on the right. So again, Belgium. And Loewy and Sam, she came up to the museum in 1918, and for some reason, I'm not really sure why, Sam Hill met her at the San Francisco exposition. And it was a big affair. She had her troupe of dancers there, and so for some reason she came up. She followed him up to Maryhill Museum, and she began to dream about a museum. The rumor goes that she was interested in Sam building actually a museum in Paris. And there is a letter in the file where she advises him that the French don't really like concrete because Sam loved concrete building. And so she said, you must probably build in stone. But nonetheless, Sam wasn't interested in pursuing a museum in Paris, but he was interested in pursuing a museum in the Columbia River Gorge at his home that he had established. And so Loewy began to collect work, and this is one of them. This is the Carrier Blues. It's Diana of the Hunt, and there's a long shot of it you can see on the right and a detail here. It's one of my favorite pieces at the museum. She also somehow or other gave works of art to the museum, she herself. This was a piece of artwork she created that was called Harmonious Spots, and it was exhibited at the Louvre, and she painted these things, and this was being shown to some filmmakers working on a documentary about Loewy Fuller at the museum. And here is another wonderful image of a detail. And again, this is really gorgeous stuff she was painting on fabric. This, of course, harks back to her days as a dancer and creating the costumes she was so famous for. And there is the exhibition catalog, and Harmonious Spots is one of the first on the catalog. It was Loewy who talked to Rodin and talked to Sam and ultimately to Alma Spreckels and managed to get our Rodin collection to the museum. And there's quite a lot of Rodin at the museum. There's some 28 or 29 sculptures in themselves, another 26 watercolors that are usually kept in storage because of the fragile nature, and then miscellaneous bits and pieces that aren't always on show. But this is Jean Defienne. He is the burgher of Calais, one of my favorite stories that Rodin represented in his sculpture. And of course, the monument itself, I wish we had the whole piece, but the monument itself is truly stunning. And this piece in particular has always truly amazed me because of the way Rodin gives the expression of this young man about to go off to what he thought was his death, leaving family and wives, children at home. And I've always been, this is just really beautiful. We also have a bust of Henri de Rochefort by Rodin, and as you probably know, he was a French journalist and a politician and a friend of Rodin. It is said that the sitter did not like this portrait of himself, and it was often hidden in his home. But it is a pretty famous portrait of a man who was very influential in French art and culture. Another one that you can see at the museum is the Head of Balzac, and it's from 1897, and this is just the head because, of course, the larger monumental bronze is in France. But this one is the Head of Balzac, and it's really quite stunning at the museum. It's really interesting to look at. And then another one of my personal favorites is Je suis belle. I like Je suis belle because it has a connection to Charles Baudelaire, and Charles Baudelaire wrote a book called The Flowers of Evil, and this is the poem called I'm Beautiful. And it's just, honestly, if you get to the museum, look at this particular piece because it's absolutely stunning in the way he portrays love and beauty and compassion to some extent. Rodin also was absolutely fascinated. He drew all of his life, absolutely drew from the moment he got up in the morning until the moment he left. When he wasn't a sculptor, when he went to bed, he'd done all this drawing. He did this as a young man. And one of the things that fascinated him was the way people moved. And so he did watercolor after watercolor after watercolor, drawing after drawing after drawing. He would have people come into his studio and just move and dance. And in particular, he was fascinated by dancers. And so in 1906, there was a performance of Cambodian dancers in Paris, and he went and he drew them. And Maryhill is fortunate enough to have, out of its 26 watercolors, a couple of these Cambodian dancer studies. And regretfully, the watercolors are not on exhibition, but they are in storage, and occasionally for groups, we can bring them out. They asked Queen Marie of Romania to come and dedicate the museum, and I think it's important in that Loie, the connection was Loie. Sam knew the Queen, but it was Loie who thought that she would make a great presence to dedicate the museum in 1926. And of course, the Queen was the daughter of Victoria of England, and of course, the Tsar of Russia. She had a lot of connections across Europe. She loved the French herself, actually. And when she came, she brought with her, they say, some 26 boxes and crates full of wonderful things for the museum. And you can see here she's in her crown. She was crowned in the 1920s, but you can see Queen Marie herself dedicating the museum, releasing a pigeon, and down below you can see the crowds that were visiting in 1926 to see that dedication. It was quite the thing. Another key and important player in all of this was Alma de Bretteville-Spreckels. She loved French art and culture, and it was Loie Fuller who actually introduced Alma to Rodin. In fact, Alma was somewhat embarrassed by the way the whole thing kind of happened, but nonetheless, she did get introduced to Rodin. Loie tended to call him the master. She idolized him. She thought his work was like I can't even explain it. It was just amazing stuff. And so she asked, she got Alma Spreckles to buy some, and she got things donated from Rodin to the Maryhill collection. And she herself collected the watercolors. And of course, there was a lot of letters writing back and forth between Alma Spreckles and Queen Marie and Loie Fuller and Sam Hill, and all of this stuff I'm telling you can be found in many of these letters as they tried to work out the sort of things they wanted the museum to show and to give to the people of the Pacific Northwest. One of those was some collections of French paintings that Alma Spreckles brought to the museum. This is Alfred Roll. It's called The Funeral of Victor Hugo. And of course, this was quite the occasion in Paris at the time. This was painted in 1885. It's a beautiful painting, actually. It's currently not on exhibition, but it will come around again. Alma also was very responsible for a set of Theodore Riviere bronzes that came to the museum. They're on loan from the San Francisco museums. And this artist did a lot of Oriental work, and this is called the Horseman. And its date is 1890s. Just wanted to make sure of that. But these are actually on exhibit right now. Our curator put them out last year, and they're going to continue this year.
Maybe we take 2 minutes to wrap up. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and then we have the Théâtre de la Mode, as you can see here. I'm almost done, actually. So we have the Théâtre de la Mode, and then this one is the Enchanted Grotto, and the theater by Christian Berard. These artists, these performers, these stage set designers, and of course the whole couture industry in Paris created these following World War II. To send around and to raise war relief money. So very quickly, I'm just going to show you what you can see at Maryhill, and then we'll do questions. So these are just vistas and views. The ranch, all of the kids, the families, and the programs that happen. And I have to say, for many, this is their first visit. For kids in the area, this is their first visit to an art museum. So come explore, experience Maryhill, look at the enchantment, and have a good time visiting the wineries and breweries in the area. And don't forget to look us up on our website, which is www.maryhillmuseum.org. And of course, we're on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and Instagram, and all of those things.
I sent everyone the link to the museum, because like that, and of course they can sign up for your e-newsletter. So they can know what's going on. And actually, the first question is, how soon can we visit the museum again?
Very good question. Clickitat County is in phase 2 in Washington State, which means we can't open until phase 3. And so while we were able to get staff back at the museum this week, the museum probably is not going to be open, if we're all optimistic, the end of June, but more likely early to mid-July, honestly, probably after July 4th sometime. Mm. But check the website. As soon as we know that we have a date, we will post it.
Mm-hmm. In the same note, there is a question, is there lodging nearby, and how much time should we reserve to tour the museum? Oh, I spent a day, and then I came back in 2015, and then I brought my father in 2016. So yeah, but yeah, go on, and yeah.
Well, there's lots of places to stay in the area at all different values. So anywhere from Biggs, which is right across the river, which has a truck stop, all the way to the Dalles, Hood River. Skamania Lodge has a lovely place. So I think there's lots of places to stay in the area. And there's lots of great restaurants all the way from Goldendale to Hood River and beyond, depending upon which direction you're going. I would certainly allow at least 2 hours, not less than that. And you're right, some people come and spend the day. We have had people fly to Portland, catch the train out to Wishram, and then come up and spend the whole day, and then go back to Wishram and take the plane back to the Portland area. So it's something you want to give yourself time to do.
And it's nice because you have this coffee shop. So basically, there is a space where, if one is tired, we can just take a sandwich and stay there, and then we go back, and so we are
Yes,
not
we
lost.
we do have the coffee shop. If you're counting on it, though, please call ahead. We're not sure we're going to be able to open it right away due to all of the space considerations we have to deal with. But we're hoping we can at least provide sack lunches to go out on the grounds and enjoy the beautiful views and vistas with. But do call ahead if that's part of what you want to do at Maryhill.
So I have two very specific questions now. Does the museum have any of these letters from Rodin and Loie Fuller?
The museum has a huge correspondence at Loie Fuller that was purchased in the 70s, actually. The museum was fortunate enough to find some money to buy these letters. They came up on the market. These are letters to Queen Marie of Romania, some smaller amounts of material to Rodin, about Rodin. For example, we have a copy of Rodin's will. I don't know how Loie got a hold of it, but indeed she did. There is also
discussion, but
yeah, I know.
Introduce it. Yeah.
There's also this wonderful, something like 13-page thing that Loie wrote about Rodin and how important she thought he was in the collection. But then the letters also include Amos Breckles and Samuel Hill and many others. Yes, there's a lot of letters at the museum.
And the posters, I imagine that the person is talking about the posters with at the beginning with Loie Fuller. In which years were those printed? Do you know?
They were mostly printed between 1897 through 1901 or 2, depending upon the artist and what the shows were. She was actually you know, she was born in 63, so she was getting a little older after the turn of the century, and she created a troupe of young women. She often said that they were, you know, they were royalty. They were the bastard daughters of royalty because that made for better press, but that wasn't actually the case. But they went around and performed after that, so yeah.
So another one, someone thinks that the architectural style of the museum seems Parisian, not quite Horseman, but similar. Was it influenced by French style?
I don't know. The architects actually were from DC. They were Hornblower and Marshall, and they specialized in concrete buildings, which is what Sam loved. And so there is quite a lot of correspondence between them. And sometimes it's called a French chateau or a mansion or something, but it certainly does look very similar to estates. There is that quality to it. And in fact, when Europeans visit, they feel like they've gotten into a part of Europe, actually. They just kind of feel the whole place feels very European to them. So there is that element to it, but it's been very difficult to define what that building actually is, you know.
Was it, Colleen, is it related? You know, you clarify the information, I know it, but Maryhill, was it from Queen Mary, or who's Mary?
Mary is Sam's daughter, basically. It was called, and actually that's a great story because it was the ambassador of France that suggested to Sam to call it Maryhill. He wanted to call it Maryland, and for some reason could not do it. The state or somebody in the government wouldn't allow him to do that, and so it was Gesserard who suggested that he call it Maryhill after his daughter and his wife, Mary. Mm-hmm. It had nothing to do with Queen Marie at the time.
Yeah. So, a personal question. What is your favorite piece at the museum, French or not?
Oh my gosh, you ask a hard one because they're all kind of my favorites. I do really like Diana, Goddess of the Hunt. I love Jean de Fienne, and I love, there's several chess sets I really, really love that you can go see. And the one in particular is French also. It's a small set that has little animals. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lion for the lion and a lioness for the, you know, and it goes on all the way down the line. But the best part about it is all the pawns are dogs. Little dogs, and they're all carved a little bit differently, and they're all individuals. So there's a lot of, it's just so hard to pick one favorite item at the museum. And of course, the site has to also be in there because it's maybe a work of God, but it is an astounding location and astounding view.
One last question. Is the Stonehenge replica full size?
Yes, actually it is. It's the inner third of the monument in Salisbury Plain. It was, instead of stone, it's made with concrete that was lined with tin of some
Yeah,
kind.
that
So
was
that you
really
get that
Sam.
kind of crinkled look. Yeah.
That was really Sam Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that was Sam Hill. That's right. All Sam Hill there.
And actually,
so,
yeah, he's buried somewhere there near the stone.
His ashes are just below the monument, and then there's a marble epitaph that's over top of his ashes.
Okay, Colleen, thank you so much. We will close the meeting. It was really a great talk. And I will now say it in public, you know, because we discussed of this partnership between the museum and L'Alliance, and so I really hope that we will pass the pandemics, and then we will open, and we will find a way either to invite you at L'Alliance or to do something, people from L'Alliance to come at Maryhill, because it is a very strong connection.
It is a lovely place. Do come. We would be happy to welcome you there at any time.
Thank you so much. Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much, everyone. So as I said at the beginning, this is the last talk of the spring quarter. We will be back in September. But in the meantime, we will stream a concert for Music Day, Fête de la Musique, in June. And then we have a project, of course, for Bastille Day, le 14 juillet. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. Stay safe, everyone. See you around. Au revoir.